Welcome back to the Big Dharma Podcast. Today I'm joined by my good friend, Indy Rishi Singh, who has a unique perspective on corruption, systemic corruption, health and healing, and ways to break free from the status quo. And I personally have had the pleasure of experiencing the magic of Indy's teachings. He's been part of Japa Health retreats before, and he's just a brilliant man, and I'm really excited for you to get to know him as well. Welcome to the show, Indy.
Welcome.
There it is.
Can we
There it
break
is.
corruption with that? I wonder.
Yeah, I think we can. I think we can break corruption with music and frequency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, vibration is so powerful. I mean, I think that's what you and I resonate with so much, pun intended, is that vibration when we are in the right vibration in our own consciousness, when we're doing the right actions ourselves, or we're participating in the right way ourselves, it actually encourages people around us to do it. Like nobody ever changes their behaviors because we're like, you need to change your behavior. But when you're doing things better and you're around other people, it seems to inherently motivate others, right?
It does. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so happy to be quantum entangled with you, because you so beautifully embody that. You're such an elevated person. You're always joyful. All the text messages that you send me always like blast me with sending you flows, sending you good vibes, right? Like always. It's very consistent. So, how did you get to be that way? Like, how did you go from the status quo, right? So, what was the journey to this embodied awareness of
I,
of elevated frequency? How'd you get there?
I feel it's interesting, right? Every origin story, right, has I don't think you can have a good superhero origin story without having like the downfall, right? Like the
Yeah,
crash, the burn. You gotta have like the toxic spill or whatever,
yeah.
right? Sometimes you become the villain, right? Or then you become the hero again, right? So I've had those journeys, right? I've been a villain. I mean, as much as I seem elevated now, I definitely have been in the past not a good person. When I was in medical school, I was a terrible person. I was total asshole and was mean to a lot of people because I was not happy, but I didn't recognize that. I was just going through the motions, right? Because I had straight A's
Yeah.
and I'm smart and I got to be a doctor, right? But at the same time, even before that, right? I've had different different integrations of my own shadow, right? Different forms of my shadow. My dad was an immigrant, barely spoke English. By the way, which was really weird because he was also hardcore Republican and like watched Fox News every day. And he was like, "What?" And like, by the way, people don't recognize this about like my culture. We're like very conservative and highly like we're very right wing, actually, the Sikh community, especially when you like start studying the ethics and growing up being Sikh. And a lot of our culture has been attacked. It's been under attack for centuries, right? From like colonialism to even the Indian government. There's been examples of different types of corruption, and corruption doesn't like the Sikh culture because the Sikh culture has a lot of like integrity. So when you have a high level of
Mm,
integrity, any forms of corruption are going to be like, oh, we got to watch out for those people, or we got to watch out for that
right.
group or organization, right? Um, and so for me, I grew up with stories about saints and stories about how saints were able to transform communities. They were able to transform incredible tyrants into amazing human beings. Like they didn't kill anybody. Like saints would actually
Mm.
transform it, right? Through their actions, through their service, their karma yoga, their dharma. They would actually transform spaces, right? And so I grew up with those stories. And then here I am growing up in America hearing these stories. And I'm like watching America become more hedonistic. Our TV shows, our channels. I mean, even I never really watched any of those Disney Channel shows, that like the family ones where Miley Cyrus and all them. But I remember I was a little bit older, but as I was watching my younger colleagues, right? Like, I was in 12th grade, not in the ninth graders or whatever. You could see how like that stuff was corrupting people, right? I
Oh,
feel
for
it
sure.
corrupting people
Yeah, the
mentally,
mind virus, right? Like the programming. Yes, it's
programming.
dark.
It was
It's
dark,
dark.
especially the kids programming. Like that was like a whole nother level, right?
And so
Um,
you noticed
Oh yeah, I totally noticed it. I remember I actually refrained from watching it because I noticed it because I was like, this is very different than the cultural stories I grew up watching. Ramayan. I love this mini series of Ramayan, right? Which was like 26 episodes, epic episodes where like you had Hanuman and Ram and Sita, and like, that's what I grew up with. So it was weird for me to like this American thing, there weren't many values and virtues being taught in these shows.
Mm.
You know, it was like
But you were born here?
I was born in Toronto.
Okay, I think I knew that. Yeah, I think you
I
mentioned
grew
that
up,
to me
I grew up
before.
mostly in the Bay Area. And yeah, I witnessed it. You know, it was really interesting to watch people. It was interesting to watch people. A lot of people my age, didn't have virtues or ethics. Like, like we were studying it because of my religion, right? And like I didn't see many Americans, other American kids, especially other Indians actually, they weren't actually watching Indian stuff or reading Indian books or anything. I was, but a lot of people weren't doing that. Nevertheless, I still got corrupted too, Cheryl. Like, I mean, to be honest with you, like, I didn't drink alcohol. I played football in high school and played tennis, so I didn't drink at all, right, in high school. I was very goody two shoes. I actually frowned upon everybody, getting intoxicated because I was like an athlete. You should have saw me, Cheryl. My muscles were like twice the size as they are now. All beefed up, in and out, like five in and out burgers, in a sitting. Um, but what would happen was in college, it kind of like the things opened up. Like I actually started drinking. My 21st birthday, I started drinking, and my dad was an alcoholic. So I just started. I once I started drinking, it opened like I just drank all the time. And one of
Mm,
the reasons that when I look back upon it, like why was I drinking so much, was because I was anesthetizing myself because I knew things were off. I knew
mm.
people were gossiping a lot. I never liked to gossip, but everybody was gossiping, right? You could literally, I mean, I can't remember, Cheryl, I can't tell you how many times I had people make up crazy rumors about me, and it would get to me, and I'm like, what? I was like nice to that person. How did that, like, I was literally nice to that person. They made something up to me, up about me. I'm like, how the hell does that happen, right? Like, so
Yeah,
for me, the alcohol was like, all right, like a way to kind of suppress like that feeling of like what the fudge is going on, right? Because I
yeah,
didn't want to play that social game, the social game that maneuvers around the mean girls, you know?
totally.
Like everything orients around the mean girls and also the fragility. So when people are like, "Oh my God, I'm so fragile. I need love. I need support. I'm a victim. I'm a victim." Everybody orients around that.
Yeah,
And it's like, wait, that's
yeah,
not healthy for anybody. That's not healthy for the
yeah. It
person who's
ends
a
up being
victim.
like validated, and it becomes your identity.
But what happens is it
Yeah.
slows everybody down, right? And whether you're talking about on a group that you're working on a project, or it's a company, or it's a college, or whatever, whenever everybody orients around the victim, it doesn't allow the transformation to happen of like what would make it so there would be no victims. Like we can't even focus on the system if we're like
Hmm.
focused on the individual's trauma. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yes, I do. I do.
I mean,
Yeah.
validating somebody's trauma is important, but like it's like if we coddle it. So anyways, I was challenged with that a lot, and in that challenging, I just started drinking a lot. I got to medical school, and the drinking turned into popping Vicodin pills,
Mm,
and then also just hitting a lot of walls. Like I went to medical school, I didn't think that it would be such a sham, like I did
oh,
not expect it to be such a sham. Like I mean, I had cousins who were doctors. I had cousins. I had friends. I mean, I thought that there were ethics and like a code of honor, right? Especially coming from a culture that was really focused on being of honor and high integrity. It wasn't there. It wasn't happening. And every time I challenged it, I would get in trouble and I would get reprimanded. And it was a cult, right? Like I could not move forward in the cult because I wasn't subservient. And it was really hard for the medical school to like reconcile with me because they were like, oh, he's not just following things,
yeah,
Everybody else
yeah,
is following
yeah.
things. And
You
eventually,
weren't drinking the Kool-Aid?
not
Yeah,
that Kool-Aid. I was drinking the rum
yeah,
Kool-Aid.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. So
and
you
then
noticed that right away. So like you get to medical school and then you're like, this isn't what I thought it was.
it wasn't like that drastic. It wasn't like a click. I'm really fortunate to have surrounded myself with amazing, beautiful people. I mean, most of my friends were like older. They were like upperclassmen, and in fact, I dated somebody who was up. She was an upperclassman, so I kind of, yeah, that kind of helped me, right? Because I wasn't always around the people in my class which were so it allowed me also to see what was damaging them. Like
Mm,
their problem is like, oh, we're gonna face those things in a couple of years,
yeah,
right? And I'm like, oh shit, I don't know if I wanna. They're not like that happy, and they're not like that. As I was just being friends with older upperclassmen medical students, I was like, dang, this is like not fulfilling, right? Like I don't know. And my own, even though I didn't have a practice of yoga or meditation at that time, Cheryl, I grew up practicing meditation, but in college and medical school, I wasn't meditating, right? I was drinking. That was my meditation.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so for me, and I was like super hedonistic, right? Like the more, actually, when I went to medical school and even going to medical, I was so heated because everybody was like, oh, you're going to be a doctor? Hello, can you take me on a date? Can you take me on a date? So I was very hedonistic because everybody wants to be with a doctor, right? Especially, especially in the Indian and like the Asian culture, right? It's like a big deal. Okay. So I was really hedonistic, but what happened was it wasn't a click, but I can't. There was several moments, there were several experiences I had where it was like I literally hit a proverbial wall with people I was supposed to have high levels of respect, with teachers and authority that I was supposed to like I was supposed to respect them, right? And it was like I could not like their ethical code, their like the way they communicate to people, the fact that they're teaching future doctors, like the fact that they're like they're the ones teaching the doctors who are going to be treating all of us, and that's what they're teaching to be like. And that was I hit a wall. I was hitting walls there because I was like,
Can you
that's
give me an example of like what, like something that you observed that felt out of integrity or just
oh, I mean,
unethical?
what one was like the highest one I ever. One teacher, she's like everybody in the class was getting like averages of 30%. It was some pharmacology class or something, and it was everybody was like getting 20-30% on their tests, and she was like just just so messed up, like purposely making the test hard. And we finally like everybody got together and we're like, hey, what the heck, like if we're all studying hella hard, we're like supporting each other, we're doing student groups. I was always like peer mentoring all the time. That's how I like to learn, is teaching other people, right? And then I learn better. And we went to her and she's like, you're all gonna be doctors, so I don't want you guys, I don't want anybody who's not dumb. I don't want anybody who's dumb to be a doctor. And we're like, so you're gonna fail all of us, so that we don't wait. Like that was a big thing to me. It was like, wait, are you here to teach us, or are you here to like?
Mm,
And she wasn't even a doctor,
mm,
right? And it was like,
yeah,
so like, wait, what? Like, there's some trauma thing happening there with her, right? She's like definitely
yeah.
projecting her own trauma,
Power and control,
power,
and yeah,
control, trauma, all kinds of stuff.
yeah.
And that was a big one. I'll never forget that because we actually rallied everybody. Like we did a petition. Like we actually got together, and nobody listened. The dean didn't care. The teacher didn't care, and it was like, wait, don't you want everybody to do better? Like, don't you want them to be doctors? If you want them to be doctors, don't you want them to actually have the confidence that they could do pharmacology? Right? Like, I mean, holy shit! Like, it didn't make sense, right? Like,
It's not very inspiring. Yeah,
no,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
like it does. It's also not it's not the code of teaching. And like the idea of teaching is you want to elevate your student, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
it wasn't
yeah.
that. That was a really big one, especially considering pharmacology. Think about how important that class is, right? And think about anything with chemistry or physics or anything like that. It's for anybody who's going to be a medical doctor in the medical space. If you don't have a strong understanding of that space, you're going to be easily brainwashed. If like a pharmaceutical company comes in trying to sell you stuff, and you don't have a strong understanding of that, of what they're bringing to you, you're just going to easily be fall victim to the corruption, because they'll be like, oh, we'll
It's
take you out to
almost like
dinner.
that's kind of the point.
Well, there you go. See, now it's like, is it on purpose?
Hmm.
Is it by
Yeah,
design, or is it by,
yeah.
so, but for me, Cheryl, I didn't even get further along. I mean, after doing like, after doing my, just basic sciences and studying, I started popping more Vicodin and popping more Vicodin, and it got to the point where I took like 27. I think I took like 27 in one sitting, and woke up in the hospital,
Mm.
getting charcoal administered and like convulsing and like being like, and I had like a near death experience. And that's sacred. I won't. I like. I've decided I'm not going to share that ever with anyone. I feel sacred things should stay sacred within us, you know? Everybody always goes like, oh, you know, my shaman experience, I like did this and I saw these beings and all that. I'm like, I think some things should be sacred, you know, and that's how we
Yeah,
maintain
I
the
do too.
sacredness.
Yeah,
And that's, everybody has their own experience. Like, it's like if I project mine on you, Cheryl, or your audience, that's not now is it really sacred anymore, or is it now projecting? And like maybe not, at what point do we start making it up, right? The sacredness. So
yeah,
anyway,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But my experience led me to like just cold turkey drop out of med school and like be like I need to do something different. If it's gonna lead me to dying, right? Being in this path, it's not worth it. And mind you, the path itself is supposed to stop people from dying. Like, wait a second, how am I going along with this when we're not healing people? Like the patients we were looking at, the hospitals I was working at, like people weren't getting better, you know?
Right,
So like,
right.
am I really doing like am I going to learn to be a mechanic and like I can't even fix a car? Like I'm not gonna.
Well, I mean, that's the hypocrisy of the whole system, right? I mean, if you look at the status, the health status of healthcare professionals as a population, they are, I think, if not the worst, some of the worst, right? I don't have the latest data, but I think at one point it was doctors had the poorest health of all, right? And
Well,
that's not by accident.
you know, I'm like now that I got elected as the executive director, the board elected me of a nonprofit, Cultivating Self, and you know, it's all about addressing burnout with physicians, nurses, therapists, and they've all gone up. It's exponential actually over the past 2 3 years because there's also been a lot of moral. It's called well, there's like burnout, right? But there's also moral injury. A lot of people don't know about
To-
this, but moral injury is
Totally.
a real thing, and it happens to doctors, especially right now, because a lot of them were did things, and even that it can't. It's hard to reconcile when you have moral injury. It means you've gone against your morality. But if you haven't studied your morality, you don't know that you're going against your morality, but your subconscious knows that you've harmed other people when you should have been healing them and you should have been taking care of them, but you were harming them, or you were typecasting them, or you were what is the thing that people were? I mean, the past few years have been kind of crazy. Like people literally, like doctors were supposed to treat everybody, but they were like, "Oh, we're not going to treat those people. They're other. They're deplorable. They're whatever." You know, like that's
I
not
do. I
that's
do. Yeah.
you know, there's a Hippocratic oath, which means you're supposed to take
Yeah.
care of everybody. And that wasn't happening. And it's still not happening. So that causes a lot of suicides when people have moral injury, when they go against their moral code. Even if they don't know their moral code, they have their ancestors' moral code, right? Like that's how we got here,
Yeah.
was we practice altruism and morality, right? Otherwise, you would have been obliterated if you didn't have that in a community. And then also moral injury, but what we've noticed also the past few years is a lot more substance abuse with doctors and nurses and everything to suppress the feelings of like inadequacy, you know?
Yeah, like you said, it's like to numb yourself, to anesthetize yourself, to escape, right? I mean, I think any type of addiction is usually rooted in escapism, right? Like you're trying to feel something different because you don't want to feel what's really there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing. I'm just looking at statistics right now. Yeah, it's been going up every year since 2020. 2020. Doctor suicides, nurse suicides have been going up significantly every year.
It's
It was already
tragic.
bad
It's
when I
really,
was in
yeah.
school.
Yeah. It's really tragic. Moral injury. Yeah. I mean, that's a really fascinating concept to think about. And it's such a problem inside of the regulated healthcare space that doctors don't have the liberty to practice medicine. They have the standard of care that they have to adhere to. And if they don't, they're in jeopardy of losing their livelihood,
Yeah.
of being outcasted, of
Yep.
being called a quack, of, losing everything.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen it happen over and over and over again. And I do feel like there's a shift happening, a big time shift, a
Mm-hmm.
big time shift. There was actually something I saw yesterday, and I need to look it up because I just saw a glimmer of it saying that I think that there's some proposal going forward about AI being able to write prescriptions. And I
Whoa.
think that that is potentially going to wake
Mm-hmm.
up a lot of doctors because if all they're trying to do is protect their prescriptive authority, they're not really practicing medicine, right? They're
No.
just they're just pushing drugs. Like we know that, right?
Oh yeah.
But if AI can do it, then why do we even have doctors? What are they even for?
Exactly.
So if people want to be in any capacity of like the healing space, if they want to practice medicine of any kind, I think that there's going to need to be a reckoning of what is a doctor supposed to be. Because if AI can write prescriptions, then
Exactly. And also, do we
we have
want
a lot of
that?
things to question.
And is the is the like blanket medication of people, is that even how things work? Like is that, are we as individuals, do we have our own individual chemistry? Do we have our own individual like response to like chemicals. Like everybody has their own, we all have our own individual hormones. Like nobody has the same
Yeah.
levels of
Yeah.
all these things. So it's like, how can you give the
Yeah.
same thing to everyone? And that kind of also goes into the vitamin space too, right? You can see both worlds are kind of like going parallel to each other because there's like the alternative health industry, right? That's like, oh, take these vitamins, take these, and you're going to be healthy. And it's like
Yeah.
they're just repeating the same patterns of the medical industry, but they're like parallel to it, right? Like, oh, you take
They
this one
are.
thing and it'll
Yeah.
fix all your problems, you know? And like
Yeah, I
that's
do.
also what the medical industry sells too, right?
Well, a lot of people come to me and are interested in what we do at Joppa Health and seek my support or the support of the Joppa team because they've gone to functional medicine, right? They were dissatisfied with allopathic medicine, and they go to functional medicine
Right.
or integrative medicine, and they end up spending a lot more money because it's not covered by insurance.
Right.
They put them on like $500 worth of supplements a month. They order a lot of tests and they spend a lot of money on tests, and then they end up just broke and more sick and
More
frustrated.
sick, more sick and
And I hate to
frustrated.
laugh about that, but
Yep.
I mean, it's definitely not helping a lot of people. I mean, there
It's
are
not.
exceptions, of course, on the functional medicine and integrative side. There are people that are more ethical, that are more focused, that are more interested in outcomes. But unfortunately, it's another space where profit takes precedent over outcomes.
Of course, of
And,
course.
incentives are perverse in so many cases.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have to reckon with these things. It's like so I'm a big person about, and Cheryl, you know this, is why we're good friends. Like it's one thing to always complain and talk about a problem, but you address the problem, you identify the problem, and then you start doing things about it, right? Like you
What does
can't
it say? Because I can't see it.
so it's this thing is a real problem, right? That even to this
Will
day,
will you
the
read it? Because I can't read it all.
examining the American Medical Association's racist history and its overdue reckoning. A lot of people don't understand that even to this day, the American Medical Association is a very corrupt organization. It's almost like a cult. It's not. It's not diverse. It's also caused a lot of harm to a lot of black and brown communities. They actually researched on people without telling them, and they still didn't even support those communities that they like did really terrible research. No
Yeah.
accountability. So do you think they would stop doing those kind of things to people? Like, do you think if you don't get in trouble for like literally testing on humans,
Well, I would argue that not only do they not suffer any consequences, but they get rewarded
they get rewarded?
for that.
Yep, yep.
Yeah,
And mind you, every doctor is like basically under their thumb. So if you want to keep your
totally.
medical license, you got to. Okay, but here's a nuance with this. Who said American Medical Association is the official thing? Like, where does that start? Like, how does that start where they go, an
Yeah,
association becomes like, oh, we're the official people now? Like, who does that? Like, what makes
yeah.
an association a regulatory body? Interesting.
It is
So,
interesting. Yeah, like how do they claim that seat of authority? How
So
does that happen?
my hypothesis is it's like an HOA. Like anytime you get a group of people and they come together and they keep coming together and they say this is our set of agreements, this is a set of whatever practices, this is now we have insurance, and HOA is kind of a great example of that. It's not a
It
government
is.
organization. It's just people living in a community. All of a sudden now they're paying for insurance, they're paying for gardening, they're paying for this, they're paying for the police, the security to come through the town. So you can see how any association can be created, right?
Yeah,
So it almost feels like we're in a moment, like to challenge this kind of corruption. I don't think we're going to transform them. They're like too ingrained. They're too,
I don't think so either.
yeah, they're too crystallized into like what they're concretized into what they are. However, what if we had an American Healers Association that had doctors and nurses and Reiki
Mm,
healers and Ayurvedic healers and TCM healers and cultural medicine healers, because there's indigenous healers, right? Like different healers, a part of that network that can also kind of cross pollinate with each other and support each other and
yeah.
talk to each other. What if, Cheryl, when we went to go see a doctor, you weren't seeing a doctor, but you were seeing a team of healers from different
Yeah, I
angles?
mean, that's what we're building. I mean, that's the objective of Joppa Health, right? Is to, bring this type of community together and, facilitate the introductions, facilitate the education, help direct people towards being their own
Yeah.
self-healer. All these
That's the
things are
key.
so important.
That's the key. That's always the key, you know? And also, for me, I think it's about, also acknowledging that we have a space to we have to a place to reimagine how do we empower caregivers, right? Because like I mean, even me, I didn't have a path. Like after I left medical school, I still want to be a healer, but there was no track for me to like go be with the community of
Yeah.
other healers to learn how to become a better healer. So that's why we started our nonprofit, because we're like, hey, look, okay, there's corruption. Okay, there's all this stuff, but where's the bridge to where we are in right relationship with what we want to do, right? Where can we also create a space of I think also it's like peer support, right? Like one of the doctors that's on our team. So we started a reclaiming healthcare fellowship. We just ended our first cohort. It was amazing, by the way. And one of our doctors right here, Dr. Azadeh, she's right here over my shoulder, right here. She actually beat Governor Newsom. There was a law in California. They were gonna censor doctors who would speak against any medical experiment. And she beat that law. She went to California. She fought it, and she got them to take it off the thing. She
Love
actually
that.
she actually yelled at Fauci at the congressional hearings. She got up in front of everybody and just like called him out in front of everybody. But
Introduce me to this goddess. I need
yeah,
to
she's
meet this
amazing.
goddess. This is
So
a powerful force.
so we actually did this fellowship, but we had all doctors. We had a TCM doctor, we had Ayurveda doctor, we had medical doctors, we had a nurse, we had myself. I don't know what I'm doing there. But we what we did was it was really we focused on we kind of like created this like immersive experience that kind of appreciated all the different ways medicine happens. Right? It happens with self care, right? But it also happens
Yeah.
acknowledging Ayurvedic medicine, which is so amazing. Like people like, what the heck are
Yeah.
we doing? It's like so much research. Like Ayurveda is not woo woo.
Yeah.
It's like research
It's not.
stuff, right? And
No,
so,
yeah, yeah. It's not.
and the TCM as well. It's like literally that stuff is work. And by the way, the AMA, the American Medical Association, is offering like 10-hour modules for TCM, but they're like bullshit. Like they do not teach you anything about the physics of like the spirituality of
Yeah.
none of that. By the way, that's a
Yeah. I
big
mean,
thing
so
too.
for people that don't know, I think hardly everybody will, but if you don't know, it's traditional Chinese medicine is what you're talking about,
Yep.
which,
Yep.
is the time-tested ancient truths about
Yep.
health and healing. And also not only health and healing, but what makes us sick in the first place,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Because nobody has a deficiency of a pharmaceutical drug and that's why they're sick,
Yeah.
right? Like that's not the reason why they're sick. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
and so I feel like I feel we're in this really special moment right now too, in like especially our political landscape in America, I would say, but I think India too. I can sense it when I talk to my cousins and my friends out there. There is like people are done. They're over how things have been.
Yeah.
You know, they're like,
Yeah.
what? But like, if we focus too much, I mean, I just learned this philosophy really recently that like for us to be in the right mindset to be able to create the systems that are going to be regenerative and supportive to all of us, we actually have to be 10% in the past, 40% in the present, and 50% in the future to
Mm.
get to that place that we want to
So
be at.
what's that based on? What's that philosophy based on?
It's movement makers. Like they've actually like studied people who have started movements that became ubiquitous.
Mm.
When they started movements and it became normalized, the movement it needed to be 10% past, 40% in the present, and 50% in the future. It kind of makes sense because if we're too much stuck in the past, we kind of get stuck. You can't like you keep
Yeah.
repeating it. I see that with people all the time. They just keep repeating the problems of the past, and they literally can't make the choices to be healthier in the future, right? Um,
Yeah.
you know this
You
with
know,
what you
I know this, and you know that I teach that, and I have practices about vision, right? And I wrote a book about it,
you wrote a
and
book about it.
it's important, I think, to actually see what it is that
Yep.
you're seeking to create in your mind's eye, whether that's a product
Yep.
or the physical body that you're
Yep.
like the health that you want to have, whatever it is, to be able to connect to. That's what intention means, right? Like to hold tension with a possibility in the future in the field, right? And so you have
Yep.
to be able to create that tension through the vision
Yep.
of what it is. And that's something that I think isn't taught. It isn't well understood.
Yep.
And
Yep.
people spend way too much time in the stage of worry of what could go wrong
Yes. Or what has gone wrong?
rather
Or
than,
what has gone
yeah,
wrong?
yeah, rather than, well, what could go right? Or what is it that I'm seeking to create? And
Right.
focus your energy and your attention and your passion and your heart
Yeah.
into the beauty of what you want to create. So okay, so take me back a little bit more because you had this awakening essentially in the hospital when you almost died and you realized this can't be my life. Medical school isn't for me. What happened after that? How did
So my
you move forward?
so I mean I have to thank my mom. You know, I can't you. I don't think any great person has ever happened without amazing women, right? Around them.
Mm.
Whether you're a man or a woman, I think it's impossible, right? And so I'm really fortunate to have a saint mom. My mom is literally like a living saint. And I'm really blessed to have somebody like her in my life. Um, After I left medical, she could have, she could have like just completely just like disown me, whatever. She could have done a lot of things, right? For me not to keep going with medical school. And, I invested so much of my money, and my family supported me along the way, which is huge. And, we come from a very poor family. Like we're working class. My mom and dad worked their whole life, never tried to, never invested in anything, just like always just, we're totally happy just being like working class. And so for me, it was really hard when I left medical school. It was like there was no hope, there was no future. But my mom was like, "Hey, come with me to the temple." We would go to the Sikh temple, the Gurdwara, and almost every day. And she'd be like, come with me," and we would go from 2 a.m. in the morning to 4 a.m. I don't know if you know, but that's called, what is that called? The witching hour, right? Um, but
Yeah,
in
yeah,
our
yeah.
but in our culture, that's when the veil is thin. So if you
Yeah,
go
I
and
was gonna
practice
say, yeah.
meditation, if you go practice japa at that time,
Hmm.
it's very potent. So I was going and doing japa for 2 hours in a sitting every night with her. And the more I did that, the more like things just started like the clarity. Like it was just like I can explain it. Like it was I cold turkey the alcohol, I cold turkey the Vicodin. Like people like what people have so much struggles right with opioids. The japa was like giving me those things. So during the whole rest of the day, I would keep doing japa, right? Like whenever I was
So,
feeling
so tell everybody what exactly that practice is.
so in our culture we have waheguru, right? But japa could be anything, right? It's anything you feel a vibration of connection within your own heart and soul, right? So I
Hmm.
don't I'm always wary of things like as a TM, like transcendental meditation, where they give
Yeah.
you a japa. Like it's like, wait, that's from like an ancient culture, and what if you don't resonate with that culture? Like what if that doesn't?
Hmm.
So it's like that's kind of weird that you pick you can. So I feel it's smart for people that like connect to a japa that they feel closely in their heart, or they can make one up too. Like you can make
So it's a
something up.
mantra, right? It's a mantra
It's a mantra. Yep.
that you
It's
repeat to yourself.
that you repeat to yourself, or you repeat with others. So when we were doing that 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. one, it was out loud with everyone for 2 hours with drums and with instruments, just constantly.
And you felt high.
Like like more than I ever felt with any of the other stuff I did, right? Um, and I hadn't done mushrooms or anything at that point yet, so I would like have psychedelic experiences in those spaces, like crazy psychedelic experiences.
That happened to me too. Before I actually used psychedelics, I had psychedelic
Yeah.
experiences through breathwork, meditation, and yoga. And that was what actually interested me in the plant medicine because I was
Mhm.
like, oh my God, this is a really cool place. This is a consciousness that I really enjoy. And if I can get there, myself,
Yeah.
what would it be like to just take a shortcut? Like I just want to go there. Like, which I think for some people can actually be a really bad thing because they don't actually earn the
Mhm.
journey to the dimension, right? And so I think that's a whole other podcast, but
Yeah.
I had the same experience. I had the absolute same experience of like really having out of body, full on altered states of consciousness, seeing shapes, seeing visions,
Yeah.
seeing colors,
Yeah.
like tapped into another time and space for
Oh yeah,
sure.
it's super
Yeah,
potent. Yeah,
yeah.
I like that you said that earning it, right? I think even me like too. It's funny because I earned my near death experience. So every time people are like, "Oh, I did
But
bufo or I did this thing," right? And I'm like, I did that already. Like I have no interest in having a near death experience. Like I've been there. Like like it's like also it's understanding these concepts and what they're innovating, even from a physiological standpoint or a neurochemical standpoint. It's like, do you need to keep having it? What are you doing with it, right? That's the thing. Like once you've
yeah,
had that realization, do you need to keep having it if you're doing the thing? Remember the 40% present? Like everybody keeps going back for like their shaman whatever dose, but like what have you
yeah.
done in between the shaman dose? Have you actually started doing the karma yoga? Are you practicing your dharma? Or is your dharma now just to go to your shaman? Like that's not a dharma,
It's the integration for sure.
Yeah. Yep.
It's the becoming of the work.
Yeah.
It's the release of the imprints
Yes.
that you see. Whatever becomes clear when you access those altered states of consciousness, and then living it,
I'm
right?
living
Like
it.
actually making the integrative change. And for me, what I believe to be true about the experience of altered states of consciousness is that it is coming into contact with the frequencies
Mm.
in that space
Hmm.
so that you understand them, you know what they feel like,
Hmm.
and then not needing the medicine anymore.
Hmm. Yeah.
Right? It shows you what that experience is, but then once you've seen it, not
Yeah.
depending on it anymore.
And also I feel one of the things that people, I mean, I'll answer your question first because I totally we went off track, but that's okay.
Totally.
I like tangents. Um,
Yeah.
and I feel what people also are longing for is community, and a lot of these medicine spaces they emulate community, right? Because you're going through like this arduous adventure, this psychonautic adventure with other people, even if they're strangers. And so everybody's so depraved of community, like meaningful
Yeah.
community. When they
Yeah.
go to their jobs, when they even most wealthier people too, they're like people are around them just like milking off of their wealth, or like everybody wants something from them, or now everybody's comparing, right? Even just regular
Yeah.
people, everybody's comparing with each other, so it doesn't feel like community, right? And so that medicine space emulates community. Okay, that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
We
So they're basically getting something out of it that it's not even really providing in like an authentic way. But I mean, I have the same perspective on overeating, right?
Yeah,
And overindulgence. It's because
yeah,
people are starving. They're
yeah,
starving so much for the nourishment of connection, community, love,
yeah,
and try to fill themselves up with other things. So
yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. I totally
100%.
get that.
Yeah, you hit it right
But
on
so
the money.
anyway, so you do the spiritual practices and oh my God, they work.
Well, I have all these amazing visions. Some of those visions came true. Some of them, let's see what happens. But like, it was cool because I had future visions during those deep meditations, and one of the future meditations was New York, was Manhattan, and it was like, whoa, like I've never thought ever that I would like be in Manhattan. So it was like seeing myself in Manhattan, and it was like, whoa, okay. And then into my lap fell an opportunity to become an educator, to work for a startup education company in the Bay Area that was basically competing against Princeton Review and Kaplan. And so it was, they were like going up against those big juggernauts. And they like, when they brought me in, they're like, oh, like, look at your pedigree. You went to medical school. Oh my God, we love you. We want you to teach MCATs and LSATs and SATs and ACT, all those tests, right? They wanted me to test them all over the Bay Area and teach kids, right? And teach college students. And I told them, I remember distinctly, I was like, hey, I'm only going to teach this if I can also bring in meditation into my
Mm,
classes.
good
And
for
they were
you.
like, at that time, it was like very novel, right? They were like, wait, are you going to bring spirituality? Like, are you talking about like religion? I'm like, no, 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 I'm not going to bring any religion in. I can't guarantee I won't be spiritual because everything I do now is spiritual. But like, I'm gonna bring meditation. Like, I don't think it's fair that we're training these kids to be like robots. Like, I'm gonna show them how like it's important to be a human because I already went that path.
Hmm.
I already went the robot path, and I knew where it led me. So
Yeah.
I kind of was like, I need to catch these kids, these smart kids, especially, right? But I was working with kids of all backgrounds, all like, things. But like, I also know the smart kids, right? Like, they overwork and they're like, they're easily captured by
Yeah.
the mainstream machine, right? To
That happened
become
to me 100%.
right. So and the smart kids capture because they're the ones who would actually transform the system. So that's a whole nother discussion of how corruption is actually embedded in a lot of our systems at this point. But so when I got into that space, I started, man, I was rocking, Cheryl. Dude, this kids, my students were getting such great scores. I mean, I'll talk about like, I had like F students getting like 2000s on their SATs. Like they were going from like getting like terrible scores to like actually getting scores that would get them into college, like just because of the score, not because of their grade, right? And also the
Mm.
smart kids were doing better too because I was also teaching them to chill out and to breathe and to like not be so stressed out about everything that they need to get great grades too, right? So it was cool to kind of learn what worked with the bad kids and what worked with the good kids, right? It was like really cool for me to like learn what works and how can I create language that actually works for all of them all across, right? That was
Mm.
really cool for me too because it was healing my trauma being, going to school and being an immigrant son, right? And becoming an immigrant family that didn't speak much English. I came across so many other hardworking students who didn't really have mentors like us, Cheryl. Like at their schools, they don't have healthy, happy adults, that are having fun and enjoying what they do. Like that's not normal for them. So like it was
Yeah,
almost
yeah.
it felt like
I didn't have mentors. I didn't have mentors, and my parents were first generation Americans. And so there was also a lot of trauma, from just that whole experience of like coming to this country, fleeing from whatever trauma they were
Mm-hmm.
experiencing, or they didn't feel safe, right? You never ever feel safe wherever
Mm-mm.
you are.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. So I relate to that big time.
And so it was therapy for me because I didn't have that, like you didn't have that, so it was felt good. It goes back to that karma yoga, right? Like if we want to heal our traumas, you don't heal your traumas by sitting in it constantly. You have to do the action, the karma yoga
Service. Yeah.
that will transform and reintegrate it, right? And so for me, that was super healing, going back and supporting students and having that be my dharma. And as I was doing that, I got promoted to New York. My boss was like, "Hey," he's like, "I don't want to lose you, but like my position is open in New York." And I'm like, "What?" And I'm like,
The
"Holy cow!"
vision.
Uh,
There it was.
so
Yeah.
I went to New York and I started doing work in New York, but I started actually pivoting. Like, so as I was doing that work in New York, I also was starting to be invited to start speaking and bringing kind of like what I was doing with the students. Companies started asking me to do it with them. And then I gave a few presentations at some conferences, like keynotes, and everybody was like blown away. They're like, "Oh my God, this is like, we never thought about meditation like this. And you like explained it so awesome." Because I was explaining in a way that was, everybody always goes like, "Oh, I tried meditation, it doesn't work. I tried it, it doesn't work." And like, I would be like, "No,
Always.
like, what are you talking about? Like, it's infinite. Like, there's infinite meditations. There's not just one and it doesn't work, you know? Like, and so for me, it was really fun.
I know.
It's crazy, right? I can't do it. I can't close my eyes. I can't do that.
I
I can't
can't.
stop
Yeah.
thinking. I can't stop thinking. I'm like, okay, fine, then use that, right? Um, but I think why I was able to pivot so fast with people and be able to hold space for people to find their own meditation is because I'm also not attached to like selling some guru or selling some like meditation practice or trying to get people in a cult of meditation. Oh no, you need to be in this cult that does meditation this way. I've never like I come from a culture that actually questions cults. Like in the Sikh tradition, it's like wait, don't ever follow any guru. Follow the guru within. That's
Yeah.
our main principle. So for me, I
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
got caught up in that, but I can see how many people get caught up in trying to sell some, version of
This is the only way.
this is the only way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think
That's
that
always
really
a red flag.
that's a red
That's
flag. Oh
always,
my God. But a
yeah.
lot of people like that's what makes them turn off from meditation because they'll get forced to want to learn a certain way or they get presented it in that way and then they think they shut down. They're like, "Oh, I don't want anything anymore." So I started working with companies and this is New York, right? Right. So mind you, I was working with like financial industry companies and I was working with education companies and I worked with entertainment companies. I ended up even getting a job with MTV after working with it because they're like, "Oh shit, you're awesome." So I ended up becoming a producer for about 6 months on a few of their shows. But what was really fun for me was kind of going to these different industries and noticing the patterns of like of disease, of like maybe like how like things were not working well, right? And consistently what I was noticing was the people in management, one, like um they were the ones least practicing mindfulness, right? Or like whatever you want to call it, like this mindfulness now, right? But like they were like the least practicing like vulnerability, like connection to their feeling, connection to like their community. They were like not practicing that. Like usually it was the management problem, like going downwards, and everybody was fighting at the bottom because they're getting scraps. And then the other thing was what I started noticing was like the lack of vulnerability was creating a lot of corruption. Like it was sometimes it wasn't even on purpose. It was like it would just happen because people are in fight or flight response, you know? And so
They
they were
do. And so nobody's willing to say this is uncomfortable.
yes.
Nobody's willing to say this doesn't feel right.
No, no, no. Everybody's
Yeah.
afraid. Everybody's afraid of their spot. They're golden handcuffs. They're like, "Oh, I'm getting my
Yep.
benefits. I'm getting my thing. I don't want to lose. I'm getting guaranteed
Don't rock
money.
the boat.
You want to
Yeah.
rock boat? Look at my rent
Yeah.
is this much. My mortgage is this much. My kids, I have to take care of my. So there's all these golden handcuffs. So people are just there's a loop, right? And I was like, whoa, seeing the same pattern in every industry. And that's when I came across one of my mentors, one of my greatest mentors in my life, Dr. Alex Einhorn, who had one of the top like clinics in New York, and he started coaching me on neuroplasticity and teaching
Mm,
neuroplasticity through laughter, right? So he
that's
actually would
right.
do
I remember this story now. Yes.
so he integrated laughter from laughter yoga in India, but he integrated it scientifically because he's a brilliant scientist and doctor, and so he was able to integrate it and talk about it through the brain and the body and explain the science of it. And so he taught me how to create presentations around neuroplasticity, and I started doing that. And Cheryl, right away, when I would do that in a company or organization, it's it was amazing. So after everybody would laugh and connect with each other in that way through neuroplasticity, actually what would happen after, sometimes it would be like right after vulnerability explosions. Like the management would like break down crying. The people, there would be like, there were like, and I've seen that happen in live moments. It's like amazing to see how when after people laugh with each other, it opens up portals for people to be authentic with each other.
I've seen it. I've seen you in action. I've seen it and I've witnessed it. And when we talked about including the laughter workshop at the Japa Health retreat, I remember you and I like dropped into a conversation. I think we went for a walk
Yeah,
actually.
yeah.
And I was like, okay, I mean, like, what if it doesn't work?
Yeah.
Like, do you remember I asked you that? I was like, what if it doesn't work? And how do you get people to laugh? And you were like, it works. It works. Don't worry. I got this. And I was actually so impressed at not only does it work and how well it works. It's remarkable. I
Yeah,
think, you ever study the gene keys? Have we ever
of
talked about
course.
that
I love the
before?
G keys. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, right. So Richard Rudd, and I forget where in the Gene Keys now, I'm probably going to go have to look it up after we get off this call, talks about over seriousness
Mm.
being like a form of disease
Yeah.
and that it's very pervasive in humanity right now.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
think that you witnessed that quite
Hmm.
significantly in that corporate space. And I came out of that corporate space too with the same exact experience. I didn't have a grid for it at the time. Like I didn't know that that's what was happening. I didn't
Hmm.
know that it was, a lack of consciousness and a lack of
Hmm.
vulnerability. And I didn't know that there was even a way for me to express the fact that this doesn't feel right,
Right, right.
because it was just like, it's like, you didn't do,
Hmm.
you just didn't do that,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
just like, you follow the blueprint
Yep.
and you go through the motions and, that's the corporate life. That's the
Yep.
corporate world. That's the path to, a good life. That's
Yeah.
what we're told, right? Just like
Yep.
you were told, go to medical school, be
Yep.
a good
Yep.
boy, get a good
Yep.
job, right? So I had no grid for that, but, over seriousness is a real problem.
And actually, when
And,
you bring up over seriousness, that's the challenge we face in the political spaces. So after my journey has led me to be like to actually study like we can focus on individual well-being and individual health, right? As a doctor, you focus individual people, right? Or if you're like a physician, but like at this moment, we have systems that like need like they're in crisis mode, right? The systems are incredibly diseased, right? Your political system is diseased. Our education system is diseased. Our farming system is diseased. I mean, you go any direction, all our systems are highly
yeah,
diseased. And so you start to treat it and you go, oh yeah, over seriousness is a problem. In fact, it's such a big problem in the political space that there is no space for imagination. And when there's no space for imagination, you can't solve problems. In fact, you always make the problems worse because
yeah,
you don't have the imagination to solve the problem. So it's like this loop that loops. And so right now, when we think, oh, there's corruption, oh, like, and even also we might be wrongly thinking like, oh, this person's going to save us. And that's also not going to be what it is. People need to recognize that actually we have more authority than we know. Like everybody has more power than they know, but they have to bring the imagination into these spaces. They have to dissolve the over seriousness with their own joy, right? And joyful resilience. Like you can't like force other people to stop being over serious. You gotta first be joyful yourself, and then you bring that joy and your imagination and your purpose and your dharma, right, to the spaces that are no longer practicing those things. And you bring them and you transform them from within.
you become it.
You become it, right?
Love it. Okay, so what if people were curious about the neuroscience of laughter and you were to just give them a couple of tidbits about it, what do you think is the most important thing for them to know?
Well, I got something awesome. Check this out.
Let's see. The tale of Ben, the laughter, what does it say? The
The
laughter
last
source.
So it's a laughter source. We published a children's book. This is just published this month actually officially.
Oh
And
my God,
so
congratulations.
yes, so it's got science in here too about how neuroplasticity works, but it also it's a really fun poem about disaster, imminent disaster, dinosaurs, right? And how you can use laughter and joy to face incredible challenges. But it also has all kinds of neuroplasticity practices. It's not just for kids. I've had adults read this and they have such a blast. It's So that's a low hanging fruit. If anybody wants to like dive in, and if you want to do that with your kids, oh my God, talk about laughing with your kids.
Yeah,
If you have nephews or nieces or whatever,
I
that's like
do. I'm immediately going to get it for them.
it's super fun. And so that's a way for me to kind of tokenize what I do. Cause I mean, Cheryl, it's almost impossible for me to like articulate what I do. Like people are like, how do you explain it? It's like, what do you mean? It's like, also it's different every time because people bring different things, right? Sometimes I get a bunch of weirdos in my presentations and it's great. Let's go, you know? Um, and when I do it with kids, it's super spontaneous because they totally bring it. And once the kids go like, oh my God, we're allowed to be kids, it's awesome, right? Because a lot of times they're not getting permission to be kids. All the adults are like, you need to like shut up and be quiet. It's like, wait,
Well, like
that's
it does not lead to wounded adults.
literally right. Don't talk, don't have
Yeah.
fun. Hey, sit down. Don't move. Don't have fun. Um,
Yeah.
Holy cow. So, yeah, if I can give one tidbit, neuroplasticity, you say, right?
Yeah.
And this is for the audience too, and everybody's gonna be able to watch this, right? People can watch this and listen to this.
Yeah. Yeah. They'll be able to see. Uh-huh.
Okay, so let's do
Yeah.
something I learned in the Himalayas when I was studying up there.
Okay.
And you'll appreciate this. So take your hands, make a little ball out of it, right? Try to be comfortable
Mhm.
with your fingers, and it's just so you make a ball. All right, take your
Mhm.
thumb and rotate it, but don't let it touch. So pick a direction, all right? Don't let it touch. All right, you got it? All right, now put it
Yeah, I
together.
got it.
All right, put it back together. Now do your index finger. All right. All right. Don't let him touch. Don't let him touch. That's my teacher said. You need to focus. Okay. All right. Put it together. All right. And then do the middle finger. All right.
Ooh, this one's harder.
You need to focus. Focus. Everybody. You need to focus. Okay. All right. Put it together. Now do the ring finger. Oh my gosh. I need to focus. Okay. You can close your eyes if you want to challenge yourself too, Cheryl, or audience members. Oh my gosh. All right. Ring. Okay. Go to your pinky. Go to your pinky. All right. And when you do your pinky a couple times, flip the direction, reverse the direction now of rotating it. All right? Now go to your ring finger. Oh my gosh, you need to focus. Wagadu, 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 wagadu. All right, and
Ooh,
then
the
go to your
ring
ring.
finger is the hardest one for me for sure.
All right, go to your
That one's a
ring.
little awkward. I gotta
Go
practice that.
finish it. Finish all the way through. Get to your thumb. Go back all the way. Finish the cycle, getting to your thumb. Cool. So that is neuroplasticity in action. In fact, what we're doing when we do that is we're the corpus callosum. It's the
Hmm.
bridge between your left hemisphere and your right hemisphere. When you do this, the innervation, the activation between that bridge is like going off the chart. So you're actually forcing your brain to communicate between both sides. So your intuitive side and your logical side are now collaborating more. Usually we're kind of unbalanced on one side or the other side, but this kind of forces you to like come together.
Yeah, I mean, I have so many theories about how dysfunctional society is because of the lack of connection to the right brain and the overactivation of the analytical, problem solving, masculine side, the left side of the brain, which is particularly problematic for women because it's
Mm-hmm.
outside of our divine nature, right? Like it's really outside of our divine
Mhm.
nature to be over analytical and problem solving all the time, right? Like we're disconnected from like the
Mhm.
beingness, right? And the right side of the brain, creativity,
It also
intuition.
harms women on the other side because if men are not tuned in with that, we're not in touch with that, we're gonna harm women and we're gonna control
Yeah.
women and we're gonna be really oppressive to women, right?
Yeah. And not understand that that's the natural state of the feminine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I love that exercise. I think everybody should do that every day, every morning. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's a fun one.
I always did
Yeah.
it with my students and they loved it. It was great. It's a great way for us to start our classes, especially teenagers because they need to something to do with their hands. Like definitely. But yeah, I mean, and last, I mean, we didn't get to even kind of touch on this. I mean, obviously the book kind of hints at it, but I also sense that like when we talk about all these things we've talked about, whether it's going back to like medical school and going back to like these systems of corruption, politics, whatever. I mean, we didn't even dive into politics, but I think ultimately, inner child, like how is our inner child doing? Are our leaders, are they healthy inner children? Like, do they have healthy children? Like, in fact, I encourage everybody who's listening to this, like, we should be very cautious about following anybody, like any leader, any teacher, anybody, if they don't have healthy inner children. Like if they haven't healed their inner child in some way, or they haven't transformed it into power, right? Because you can have trauma as a child, but if you are still a traumatized adult and you're leading, then you end up with leaders. Like, look how many presidents we have around the world and prime ministers who are literally traumatized. Like, their parents were, like, some of them didn't even have two parents growing up. Some of them were
Yeah,
like literally traumatized and molested, and now they're our presidents or our prime ministers or our leaders. And it's like, wait a second, some of them didn't get love from their mom and dad growing
yeah,
up. They're treated like, and now they're our leaders. So like, we have to be very cautious who's leading us, because if they're traumatized children that are now adults, they're going to be easy to manipulate. Like, that's the thing, like
of course.
Epstein code and everything, that shows that
Yeah,
you can blackmail people if you go at their trauma, right?
totally. Right, totally. So I have a theory about this. And my theory is that the reason why it's not rejected and recognized to the extent that it should be, right? Like the reason why we see so many corrupt leaders that are dysfunctional is because people don't know how to see it.
No.
They don't know how to recognize it because they haven't looked at their own truth. And it's a really challenging thing to do, obviously, right? Like this is part of the whole point of being alive, if you ask me, is to learn how to love and to overcome the pain that made you in any way incapable of love,
Right.
right? Whether you're
Right.
judging or fearful or whatever it is. And so that I think is a cliche. It's such a cliche, but like the inner peace starts, the world peace, right? So
Mhm.
until we're able to find that within, we can't actually recognize it.
Mhm.
We don't even know how dysfunctional things are around us until we acknowledge the dysfunction within us.
Exactly. Exactly. For me, it starts with the child. Like our inner child, it never goes away. Like, we're still that whatever we experience as children, it's in us, as it always will be a part of us.
Samskaras.
It's like a tree, right? That the inner trunk is always going to be there. You can't take out that inner trunk. If the tree, it's actually a pivotal part of it. So is our inner child. And if we don't recognize it, we don't spend time with it. In fact, my hypothesis too is we need to lean into play. We need to go to more spaces where there's play, especially as adults, where we can play with other people, play with adults, because that's also where our inner child can come out. But it's not like sitting with a therapist, all right, now tell me what happened when you were a child, or it's not sitting with like a shaman and like, now we're going to re-traumatize you. Like, no, it's like actually
Yeah.
using play as a form of accessing your inner child and being able to see it within and connect with it within when you're playing with other people. And you could be a 50-year-old and still play. You don't have to like ever stop playing. It's actually good for your brain. It's good for your heart to play. It actually is how we problem solve, Cheryl, better is through play. In fact, AI now, like the really smart language learning AIs, they all use play. Literally, they
Really?
program play. That's why they're so smart.
I didn't know
So
that. I'm going to have to ask my data
but
scientist about
but
that.
but that's biomimicry, right? So they're copying like animals and humans. We actually are so smart because we play. But humans stop being smart when we stop playing. Yet look at our systems. Look how serious everybody is. So that's why
Mm.
everything is stunted. You look at all our systems, they're like falling apart because there's not play
Over seriousness.
over seriousness.
Over seriousness. It really is a disease.
It actually is a really scary disease because then it makes everything not fun. Like, when things are not fun, what the
Yeah.
fuck are we doing, Cheryl, if we're not having fun, you know?
Dude, seriously. Dude, seriously. I mean, say it again, man. Like, if we're not having fun, what the fuck are we even doing? Why are we even here? I mean, just to pay bills and die?
Oh my God. Don't invest. You're
No.
here to invest, Cheryl. Make sure you invest.
Oh my God. This is why I love you. This is
Or
it.
maybe we should
It's
invest. We could create fun stocks. Invest in fun.
invest in fun. Yeah. Invest in having fun in your life every day and things that
Yes.
make you happy.
Yes.
I mean, we put so much freaking attention on everything else, man. I mean,
Yep.
that's so much about what I teach too, is just to bring awareness to like, where are you placing your
Yep.
attention?
Yep.
Like, just audit that and see what happens. Like, and especially if you're honest, if you're really truly honest,
Yep.
if you take an honest evaluation, I mean, that's why I built the Japa Health Assessment.
Yep.
It's like, okay, here's all the honest questions. If you really want to transform your life,
Yep.
you just got to be honest with what's
Yep.
really going on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I'm also available to be a fun accountant if you need to be assessed for your level of fun.
That's amazing. Oh my God. Another thing that I love about you, let's switch gears, is your passion for regenerative agriculture and all
Oh.
things regenerative. Talk to me how you got interested in that. Like, tell me what piqued your interest and what are you doing in that space? And how is it connected, right? 'Cause it's all connected to
It's
well-being.
all
It's all comes back. Yeah.
everything I do is connected. It's like I don't do anything. I'm so discerning these days. It looks like I'm doing a bunch of things, but actually everything I'm doing is exactly what I want to do, and so it's so easy. Like everybody's like, "How do you do all these things?" It's actually like very easy. Like actually, I can do more things actually because I'm doing things I love. And the things are so intersecting. So oftentimes when I'm doing something, I'm doing multiple things. Like especially with regenerative agriculture, it's first of all, I might come from a family of farmers, right? My mom is a
Mm.
farmer. They're indigenous farmers actually, so their houses are like made from adobe and clay and buffalo poop. And the water
Have
buffaloes
you
live.
been following Kiana lost her house in the Altadena
I
fire.
saw
Did you know
that.
that?
I
Yeah,
know.
so I know our soul sister. I love her so much. And so she's been posting a lot about that
Yep.
actually, because,
Exactly.
she's very passionate about that too.
Yep.
And so now of all times is a good time to be calling out like why we need that kind of
Yeah.
architecture.
And how
Like
we need
why
to
do we
create
need these?
and how we need to create the bridge. That's why I'm doing a lot of the political stuff I'm doing is because, like I said, there's not imagination. I call it civic imagination. So a lot of decision makers don't even know what's possible. So they can't approve of it if what's possible. Like some of them have never been inside of a dome, like a dome structure, let alone a Adobe dome. Like so we have to create more demystification for these things for the people who stamp that it's
Yeah,
allowed.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but on that note, regenerative agriculture for me is kind of connected to, back to medicine, right? Like when we start studying Ayurveda or Chinese traditional medicine or any integrative medicine, you start to realize that food is medicine. Actually, like it's the original medicine. Even Hippocratic oath comes from Hippocrates, right? Who actually like wrote down, and he probably went to India, by the way. If you like study his stuff, it's like, wait, he's like Ayurveda, basically.
Yeah.
But like it's really food is medicine. Like food heals us, especially the food that grows around you and near you. It's more healing for you. The more that it doesn't have chemicals in it, like it's not sprayed with pesticides and whatever, it then is like even more healing for you. And it's also more energizing. So if you eat from food that's within like a mile of where it grows from you, the amount of chi, the amount of energy you have is so much different than going to the grocery store and getting food that's coming from Mexico and China and all these different places.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
literally you're eating more from where you literally are physically placed in set and setting, right? You're like eating from your setting. That being said, for me, regenerative agriculture is also important in the sense of it's a story. And we need to find these stories that remind us how sacred things are, right? And regenerative agriculture reminds us that we should keep nature sacred. Because if we keep nature sacred, not in the sense that we don't want to touch it at all, right? That's too conservative, right? Too
Yeah.
conservatism, right? We actually need to be in stewardship of it, right? The stewardship of the
Absolutely.
water, stewardship of the land. And when we are in right stewardship, like, because I come from a culture that's like that. By the way, oh my God, this is a totally tangent, but like, we have to also reckon with religions around the world. A lot of like Eastern religions that are very ancient and indigenous religions that are very ancient, they're abundant religions. I like to call it abundant mindset or growth mindset religions. If
Hmm.
you notice, I mean, I know this in my culture, we're always giving stuff away. There's never like, oh, we don't have enough. Oh, sorry, we
Yeah.
don't got enough for you. Oh, you're not Sikh? Oh, sorry, we can't give you anything. Like, we're always giving food away. You know why? Because we're farmers. So we already know that we can grow food. If we need more, we'll grow more and we'll give it more away. There's never a
Yeah.
mentality like we don't have enough. If you're like a Buddhist religion was in the forest, so they had the forest were like abundant, so that's why they were like giving stuff away. Same thing with like indigenous, a lot of indigenous religions that come from like communities that are very very abundant. They're very very loving and giving, right? Now
But
you go
this
to the
this is a fractal that's really important. This is so important because people who come to me that know my story of overcoming Hashimoto's and trauma and all the inflammatory issues, right? That have worked with functional medicine doctors and all the things and the naturopaths and they haven't gotten better. What I discover almost 100% of the time after, I'd say usually takes a few conversations, sometimes as long as 6 weeks, but it doesn't take me that long to figure out what it is in their consciousness that is creating a sense of scarcity. There's always some element of scarcity. Okay, whether it's scarcity of self-worth,
Mhm,
whether it's scarcity of love, whether it's
mhm,
scarcity of
mhm,
resources, it always comes back to
mhm,
that
mhm.
that I find that when they address that, their health improves
Oh
because
yeah.
it's usually like, well, I don't understand why I'm not getting better because I'm doing all the right
Yep, yep, yep,
things.
yep, yep.
So not only do I feel very strongly that having a connection to the land, especially, we teach about circadian biology and eating
Yes, yes.
seasonally and
Mhm,
locally obviously
mhm,
informs your
mhm,
mitochondria because food is like a barcode. It's like a light
mhm,
barcode for your
mhm, mhm,
environment,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
So it's like giving you that input of like where you are. right? It's
Exactly,
like, what is
literally.
your reality, right? So not only is that important for your physiology, but I think also addressing the fact that the belief that I have enough
Yeah,
because I am provided for by the land
yeah.
actually sends a signal of safety to the nervous system,
Nervous system.
right? Because when you're telling yourself a story that you don't have enough, there's some amount of scarcity in your environment.
Yep, yep,
Well, what's that going to do? Like from an ancestral perspective,
yep.
if the nervous system detected any amount of scarcity, what's it going to do? It's going to conserve
Oh
energy.
yeah.
It's going to start to shut down.
Yep. And the vagus nerve doesn't get activated, so you can't regenerate.
Correct.
Your body can't regenerate. So if you have any illness, if you have any like if there's any problem,
100%.
your body can't regenerate. It just stops that process of regeneration. Um,
100%.
and so the opposite side of this, Cheryl, to flip this is the mind fuck that's going to happen here. Okay, so you have these religious traditions around the world, spiritual traditions around the world that are based in growth mindset, based in abundance mindset. But then, okay, check this out. Look at the religions and spiritualities that come from the desert: Christianity, Islam, Judaism.
Mm,
They're literally desert
yes.
religions, right? So guess what? Do you have abundance in the desert or do you have scarcity in the desert?
Wow, that's a deep one. I never thought about that.
So now
I
you want,
love that.
so you now you and you now you look. I mean, you come from the Jewish tradition. You and I have so many friends that are Jewish and Muslim and Christian. I noticed like the ones that come from the there is like a sense of scarcity and like there's not
Yeah.
enough for everybody. There's like a culture
Yeah.
that there's not enough for everybody. You know?
Yeah, and it's something I've had to work on and bring awareness to in my own life and like repattern my nervous system and do so much shadow work around
Yep.
because it still comes up for me
Yep.
sometimes, and I have to recognize when I'm starting to feel that frequency,
Yep.
right? And then affirm, I have enough, I'm
Mhm.
provided for, like that abundance consciousness is pure medicine.
Yeah. I mean, and it might be self-informing. Like I wonder too how the stories are reaffirming themselves through like generations. Like if the generations keep saying the story that we're always in scarcity, we're always wandering the earth,
Yeah.
we're always then it's going to constantly be that story no matter what happens, right? And I think like if the culture is creating the traditions of like, hey, we are always going to be taken care of and provided because we are what how that transforms the culture. And so it is our invitation for all of us now that we're all connecting in a way that our ancestors never did. Like your parents never had the chance to connect like this with an Indian
Right.
and cross
No.
pollinate, right? And
Uh-uh.
so I think we do have this opportunity right now to create like a rainbow coalition or whatever you want to call it. I don't care. Maybe that's not the right. It's been that the rainbow has been hijacked by like a different movement, right?
Yes,
But
yeah.
but like what we need to come together now, like the crown chakra, right? And like recognize that we're all royalty. Like your path is royalty, and my path is royalty, and every path is royalty. Can we be abundant together? Because there's enough. The planet is enough. We can regenerate. By the way, Cheryl, that another reason I love the regenerative movement, like the regenerative agriculture movement, but it's not just agriculture. It's regenerating our watersheds, regenerating our lakes, our rivers, everything. It's not just regenerating air, right? What the reason I love that space is actually there's people and there's communities, and we're doing it too with Cosmic Labyrinth, right? Where like if you bring a bunch of people to work on the land and you like plant trees and you do stuff, literally if you watch it over 10 years, you can turn deserts into forests in 10 years with human support,
Yeah.
deserts into forests. So like we can do that, but we have to do it together, right? And that's that story that like actually we can actually we're not the climate story that like oh it's just going to get worse and get worse. No, that's not true actually. It's completely false. But we have to
Completely
put
false.
effort for it. We actually have to steward the land. We have to team up together and partner. Hey, look, Cheryl, if somebody doesn't have the energy to dig the holes and do that, I got the energy, but then feed me. Maybe you can cook.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
we need to come together in that way and support each other in different ways to do the work with the land.
So there's that direct connection to like community and cooperation and like feeling the abundance of support, right? Because one of the things that I think is rooted in scarcity so much is like, I don't have support.
Yes.
And like a trauma response, a very big trauma response, especially for like type A females that I've seen and I've experienced myself. So here I'm going to project a little bit is that, I have to do it all myself.
Yes.
I have to do it all myself. I have to carry the weight of the world, and that's not true.
No.
That's not true.
No.
And when we hold those beliefs really tightly, whether it's the scarcity of food or whatever the
Mhm.
scarcity belief is, what we tend to attract is more of the reasons to feel that way.
Totally. Totally.
Right. So it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy also because we're so magnetic.
Yes.
So like starting to believe fundamentally that we're abundant is going
Yeah.
to attract more reasons to feel abundant.
Totally. And even from a mystical standpoint, we have to recognize the cosmology that's happening right now with like the stars and the planets and the eclipses and like there's things that are happening cosmologically, right? That like the Aquarian age is popping off. So what we think happens faster. What we put energy happens faster. So we have to be very discerning what we're giving our attention to because that's going to happen more, right? And so we have to like decide and make choices much more distinctly. And also, to add to that, Cheryl, there is also a proponent of ecotherapy that I've been studying and giving. I gave a presentation last year at a mental health conference, actually, about ecotherapy for healing ancestral trauma. And the research behind I'm not talking about ecotherapy like getting your foot in the soil, like taking your shoes off. That's not the ecotherapy I'm talking about like actually working with the land, like tending the land, like gardening with it, farming with it, taking care of the watersheds, like actually doing like physical work and building work and stuff like that, how that is actually healing. And they've proven it actually in World War One, after the soldiers came back from America, it was something called horticultural therapy. That was original
Yeah,
ecotherapy. And it was taking soldiers who had PTSD and having them work with the land and farm. And they were rehabilitating like crazy PTSD, and they're rehabilitating. So like
I believe it.
so working with the land helps us also regenerate our consciousness too, because we're simplifying and we're like coming back to the land, coming back to where our ancestors were doing, because all of our ancestors at some point were tending and
Yeah,
caring for the land, and that was when you were safe, right? You're not going to tend the land when you're at war and you're like things are flying,
totally.
right? So you're also safe when you're working with the land. You feel good. You hear things. You hear it the sun. Oh my God, you get the vitamin D from the sun. You don't need to go in a machine to get vitamin D. You can like get it from the sun, right?
What's
Like,
crazy is to hear you say, "Oh, they've proven it," and this comes up a lot because I get it. A lot of people want the evidence. A lot of people want, they want the science. They want to feel that what it is they're buying into has been proven or whatever. But
right.
I feel like we farm out so much
Yeah.
of what is reasonable
Yep.
outside of ourselves. And if
Yep.
you just think about it, of course, that would be healing. That's what we're meant to do as humans. That's like the most natural, innate thing. So, like, of course, that's going to bring us back to a positive state.
Yep. Yep.
Like, we need science for that. I don't know. That's one of those
I
things
don't
that
I
I
don't
feel
think
like is a bit ridiculous.
I don't think we need science, but I'm also on the proponent. I'm a big fan of Krishna and the trickster energy, and Coco Pelli, and I love being the troll, the conscious troll. Is that a thing? Being a conscious troll? And so for me, it's really important that like we remember sometimes you have to trick people. Like when people don't know what's good for themselves, right? You have to use neuroplasticity and you have to use skills and wit and creativity and humor and nuanced ways, because it's actually they don't want the data. Actually, that's not really actually what motivates people. I just took a really great course recently about writing op-eds, and they were like, it was really amazing course because I was like, oh, it helped me understand that we never convince people. Like when you're trying to convince somebody, you don't ever that never works. Like actually, you
No, it
don't ever
doesn't.
convince anybody.
No, yeah.
But if you reframe things, then that works because you're not discounting their perspective. You're like, hey, let's broaden the perspective. Like, oh yeah, your
Mm,
perspective is right, but also check all this stuff out, right? So we need to do
yeah.
that more especially when it comes to connecting with the land and food. We have to create those spaces of being like, oh, we're gonna have this really fancy dinner that's gonna be all farm to table. Come through. Oh, by the way, we're gonna go really quickly. And when they show up and they're like, oh, it's so fancy, like, oh wait, we're gonna go pick the tomatoes real quick, and we're gonna go do this before we eat. So we have to find nuanced ways, right? To like, but it's stewardship. You can't just be like, oh, you're rich, and like, all right, come sit at the table. You're rich. Like, no, we have to be a little bit more pushy with how we
To
are.
like get them to opt in.
Yeah, yeah,
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think we've all experienced that in the last 4 years that you can't just argue with somebody about your perspective and they're going to somehow change their mind. Like that doesn't ever happen. As a matter of fact, usually there's the opposite effect.
Hold on, let me send you a bunch of YouTube videos and Instagram or TikTok video, and that'll convince you.
Right, right. Oh my God, what a trip it's been the last couple of years. I mean, how do you feel now about everything that we've experienced? And I know you and I are on the same page about pretty much everything, at least from what we've, shared conversations about. I mean, how do you feel now? Like, Trump is back in the White House, and we've got the Maha movement and RFK. How are you feeling about where things are headed, and what are your concerns?
I mean, I feel I'm always gonna have like charadikala. That's like a big thing in our culture. Always gonna have optimism, like no matter what. It could be the shittiest moments, and I think it's important for some of us to cultivate optimism even when it's terrible, right? I think that's a really important part about being human. is recognizing there's always hope. There's always, right? There's a side of me that recognizes that many people are feeling like things are really off, you know? That just things are off. I feel it's an important moment for people like us, Cheryl, we're like, it's a different type of warriorship right now. Like, we don't need to have weapons right now. We need to actually be the bridge builders. Like, really, in actually old school warrior philosophy is the greatest warriors in history were actually bridge builders too. Like, you know, if you build a bridge, you don't need to do the fight, right? And so
Yeah.
we need to create a bridge for a new possibility, right? And everybody goes like the old possibility. I mean, that's why Trump got elected. It's just like everybody's done with the old possibilities. They're like over. We know what we're getting, right? However, new possibilities, it can go technological too. Like I'm very worried about the technocracy, right? Aspect. That's already happening no matter what. Look, I mean, all this stuff we're using, it's already hijacked us. Like everybody's using their phone more than we've ever done in human history. And is it that much helpful? Like using the phone. And so what we need to recognize is that the Maha movement and I think the regenerative movement is a good call to action for us to get back to the land. And so I'm very hopeful and I'm feeling into that. Like I'm feeling as I'm even hosting events here in LA and all around where we are meeting outside in groups where, you haven't come yet to one of our things, but we've been doing eco festivals where we like also invite government officials to those events, right? But we also invite community members and indigenous people and spiritual communities, Christian, whatever. We invite whether right wing, left wing, we invite everybody to the space. And nobody ever talks about politics actually in those places. Like we're all like eating food together, sharing music, planting trees, doing stuff. And it's like, oh shit, like, wow, like there's no politics happening. There's no toxic politics happening here. So that's possible. And by the way, the government officials that come to those events, they're like, oh my God, we've never connected with the community ever before like this. Because they're
Oh,
always
wow.
at the
Yeah,
youth.
it's true. Yeah.
Well, because they're always at those official government buildings where it's very oppressive and it's very like there's like a hierarchy there, right, with the
Yeah.
public. So
They're not just like mingling with regular people and understanding them and getting to know them. And yeah,
laughing with
yeah,
them, like being
yeah,
silly, planting
laughing.
with them, right? So I think I'm noticing from my perspective how valuable that is for us to create these common spaces, kind of like what Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson, our founding fathers, like they were big proponents that there need to be places like the mother tree in town or like the natural places around town that everybody congregated, and that's where people would resolve problems, right, in the community.
Yeah.
We need to rebring that back, right, in communities, right? And I think that's what builds that. It's called asabiya. It builds social trust, social glue, when everybody actually trusts each other in their neighborhoods. Like I can't do anything about Trump. Trump is in DC. I don't know. I mean, eventually maybe we'll do mushroom together or something, but like he's way too far out there, right? However, we got stuff to do in our own community where we live right here. Cheryl, wherever we live, we can make an impact where we live. Let's focus in our own backyard. Let's focus on our gardens and not just our neighbors' gardens too, because guess what? Your neighbor's garden affects your garden eventually, no matter what. So let's connect with our neighbors. Let's connect with each other. That's what the founding fathers' dream was, actually. Like if you really study it, it was so that we are a republic. A republic means that it's city, county, state, federal. So your power starts at the local level and it goes up to the federal. It doesn't go down from the federal. It goes up to the federal. We have authority
Yeah,
at the local level. Like, all around the country, local people either shut down or didn't shut down. That was locally decided,
that was, yes,
right? So like,
very, very
so
true.
that's the science. That's political science, right? So we need to understand our systems. And I always say this, Cheryl, like talking about politics, right? It's crazy that we all are playing a game. Like you would never play chess with me, Cheryl, if you didn't know how to play chess, right? And I
Hmm.
was a master chess player. Would you play chess with me if you didn't know how to play chess?
No, I'd be like, he's gonna kill me. He's gonna
Yeah.
beat my ass. I'm gonna
So
lose
we're
immediately.
so we're all playing chess with the government, but we don't know how to play chess. So like we need to start learning how to play chess. Like how does the system work? How do policies work? How do we make policies? How do we if what if a teacher in our community, a nurse, what if a yoga teacher in our community becomes the mayor? What would happen then? Holy shit. And the mayor brought
Yeah.
a meditation to all the public servants. So we need to start thinking about the game, right? And playing the
Yeah.
game because the game is
Yeah,
playing
but
us
the system is rigged because there's a limited education on
on
purpose,
purpose.
in the public school system, which keeps people in the dark
Yep,
essentially, right?
yep,
And so if you don't know how the system works, then how are you going to be empowered to
yep,
participate in a productive way, right?
exactly.
This is one of the reasons why I love you so much, because you're such a conscious leader in this way. Like really, really, you really are, Indy. Just the position of leadership that you take about these principles in the community is really inspiring. We
Oh,
need
thank
more Indies.
maybe not. That might be too many. I'm gonna have to take them out, Highlander style. But we need everybody. We need more. We need Cheryl. We need Indy. We need Tiffany. We need Mike. We need Chintu Lal. We need all
Right.
the different people, right? To be the most authentic superhero versions of themselves. And so I love what you're doing with Juppa, and what we're doing with Cosmic Labyrinth too. Is how do we reimagine personal development so that it's not just individual personal development. It's actually community development. You don't have an individual without a community. How do we intersect those things so that personal development isn't like a individualized journey? I think that's critical right now
Yeah.
because I can't. By the way, I can't do the stuff I do, Cheryl, without the amazing people around me that support me, right? And so, like,
Yeah.
and you too, right? So we also have to own that too. That we have to build community and build that in personal development with others as well.
Well, my hope, and I love that, because my hope, as we move into what I think is a new chapter, it certainly feels that way. Like you said, people are, tired of the way things were, is that we are able to come together with less friction around differences. Because I think that there's been, I mean, we've all seen it, right? Like such fighting and conflict around what you believe or what I believe, or who did you vote for? Or did you get the vaccine or did you not get the vaccine? Or did you wear a mask? Or, all the things that have been such hot topics over the last few years that have broken families apart. And, I don't know what the answer is to that. I think it's a multifaceted
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah.
But my hope is that the tension around some of that, hopefully all of it,
Yeah.
starts to dissipate, and that there's a collective healing in a different kind of a way. And I'm not talking about just like, oh, heal our mitochondria, because of course that's important. But again, it's a fractal, right? It's like each one of those little bio batteries inside of ourselves is representative of like each one of us as
Totally.
individuals, right? And so if you have
Totally.
like sick mitochondria in the system, then you're not going to have enough energy. The same thing is if we have sick individuals, then we're going to have sick
Exactly.
communities. And
Exactly.
so that I'm hoping that we move more in that direction, but it's going to be interesting to see
Well,
how things go.
that's why I'm so compelled to create gathering spaces that are ecological, like where we're doing ecotherapy and horticultural therapy, but we're also sharing and celebrating each other, like celebrating our cultures, our spiritualities, celebrating it, not shaming, right? That's the important
Not
difference,
shaming.
right?
Yeah.
Not shaming,
Yeah.
celebrating each other, right? And also being like unafraid, like radically fearless. And I think even in there's like the DEI movement, all these things, they're still very scared. And I think like we got to get away from the fear-based gathering, the
It's so
fear-based
bad. Yeah.
justice, whatever, right? And because the fear then it kind of creates this othering that gets in the way of us coming together and unifying. And so I think there's something about that as coming together in real places, not virtual, in real places together and
Hmm.
building that trust with each other, to seeing each other, right? And then from that place, oh my gosh, I don't know what's possible because we haven't done that yet. Like, we have all this technology, but we still haven't done the coming together and celebrating each other yet?
Yeah. Not for a long time. I mean, I think that was very much part of the 60s, but we, yeah, I mean, there's such a strong, I mean, this is coming from a tech CEO, like coming out of my mouth is there is a direct correlation to the amount of money that we invest in technology and the sicker we get, right? So, I think that the conscious use of technology is really important, especially as we move forward, because it's not going away. Like, I
Exactly.
mean, we can't, it's the train has left the station.
Yeah.
And, I think that there's ways to use technology that can support humanity and
Yeah.
can support the expansion of consciousness and can support healing and health.
Yeah.
But like you said, we have to connect to each other in order to do that, because we can't, if we just stay in our houses with our VR headset, like that's not how we're going to
Yeah.
be healthy at all.
Yeah,
Like
and,
at all,
and
ever.
I'm a big proponent of disaster preparedness. Like I come from a culture that's all about sovereignty and resilience. Like I told you, like the Sikh tradition is very Republican in that sense and very far right. We're very disaster preppy, right? Because it's when you have your sovereignty of food, water, housing, all that community, you have that all taken care of. Now, if anything bad happens, you're
You just can relax.
not only can you
Yeah.
relax, but you can support other people like who are stressed out and like, having to escape or flee or whatever, right? You can actually be a
Yeah.
resource to others. And so for me, I think disaster preparedness is where we can lean into at this moment, especially with what's happening with the fires. I think just generally speaking, we need to lean into that because what happens is if obviously what we learned over the past few years, Cheryl, is that people mobilize around fear, right?
Of course. Yeah.
Right?
Big time.
They've mobilized fear. So now, okay, fine. Let's create the fear of disaster to come together. Like if we need that, let's come together around preparing for disaster. And mind you, when you prepare for disaster, guess what happens? You start to think about your water sources and start to fix your water
Yeah.
sources. When you think about disaster, you start to fix your food sources and getting it more local. Then you fix it, when you start focusing on disaster, you're like, wait, who are the caregivers in the community? And let's make sure we take care of the caregivers so that if anybody needs a caregiver, they're here. Firefighters, police officers, everybody, you're like, oh, we need all of them to be very well taken care of so that we're going to be good, right? So you can see how focusing on the disaster preparedness allows us also to mobilize more cohesively and coherently, you know?
For sure. And another thing that I recognize is a problem for disaster situations is if you're not physically fit, you know what I mean? Like if you can't like run for your life, if you can't, carry shit on your back, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like that's a problem. And if you're dependent on pharmaceuticals, what happens when you can't get access to them? Right? Like in a disaster, like if you're dependent on that, right? So like disaster
Good point.
preparedness is really about resilience.
That's a
It's
good
really
point.
about like being self-sufficient and healthy and strong. And we've been through so many of them just recently that it's just keeps coming up for me that it's like we don't, just like with yoga, right? Like you don't practice yoga because things are good,
Yeah.
right? You practice yoga to prepare yourself to be uncomfortable, right? Because it's like we're literally practicing being uncomfortable when
Yep.
we're on the mat, being able to focus our attention, being able to regulate our breath, being
Yep.
able to stay steady and easeful in moments of challenge,
Yep.
right? So it's like that's when it's most important is to practice when things are good for when they might not be, right?
Yep.
Because it's
Yep.
always up and down, right? Yeah, so I think that's a really good point, and I've been trying to teach that and promote that, but people get lazy. I mean, we know that the kleshas, you're a student of the text, right? We know that the kleshas have identified this thousands and thousands of years
Mhm,
ago,
mhm,
right? Like,
mhm,
what are the main obstacles on the
mhm,
path,
mhm, mhm,
right? Ignorance of the self, the true self, the
mhm,
divine
mhm,
self,
mhm,
number
mhm.
one, and laziness, right?
Laziness. Yeah.
Right.
And that goes back to like our relationship with work and effort, right? And like you, I mean, you come across this many times over, I'm sure, but like people don't know how to work right now, right? Like, what does it mean to like put right work to it? Yeah, not like emailing. Like people are like, oh, I'm so burned out from emailing and Zoom meetings. I'm like, that's not work. like work is
Right.
actually go out in the field and fucking farm for like a day, and that's fucking work, right? Go clean a
Yeah.
house for like 5 people, and that's work. Like working is not sitting at a computer doing like Zoom meetings, right? And so I think we need to reclaim and reframe work so that it also connects to the things we need. Like we need safety, we need food, we need these. There's certain things we need, right? How do we
Yeah.
make that work that's involved with those things we need? How do we celebrate that and celebrate the people who do that work, right? Because like it seems like you came from working class parents. I came from working class parents. Like our whole system is built on working class people doing stuff. So like,
Well, I think it
hello.
comes down to purpose. I think it always comes back to the same thing for me, which is when you come into contact with your own heart and you heal, then that's when your purpose is revealed to you. And that's when you realize all of the other things that you're applying yourself towards
Yeah,
are futile,
yeah.
right? Like if they don't have a higher purpose, then like what are you even doing here?
Well, that's what happened, right? You see that the wealth thing, right? When people get over like $200,000 a year, remember that thing? They stop being more happier, right? Because like you start to disconnect from why you're getting all that money. Like you literally keep
Mm,
getting more money, but you're not really connecting it to work and your effort. It's not connecting to purpose and meaning. It's like you're just getting more money, more money, more money. But what's the money even being like? So it creates this like feedback loop of actually not having worth, even though you have more
yeah.
money. Which is
And that's
why,
why the name of the podcast is Big Dharma, like literally the name of the podcast.
yeah. Well, thank you. This is amazing, Shaw. I feel like we could talk for hours, but maybe we
I
should.
know.
Maybe this is part one of many.
This is part one for sure. We'll have you back because you have so many other things to talk about, and I know you're really involved in civics and in helping to inspire leaders,
Hmm.
right, to change their perspective or open their perspective. Right, we'll talk about that another time. But for now, share with people some of the specific organizations that you're a part of and how maybe they could get it in touch with you or be a part of what you're doing or follow along? Like, how can they find you?
Beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so folks can find me on LinkedIn, Indy Rishi Singh. I have a podcast myself, a big Dharma podcast myself, called Political Hope, which is my therapy around politics. But it also, I interview farmers, regenerative farmers. I interview mayors, governors. I interview people running for office. I interview people who have petitions. So if anybody listening wants to start a petition to get rid of, like, let's say you want to get rid of like certain like dyes or something out of your like schools and stuff, right? I'd love to like support your petition by giving amplification. So I've done that a lot on my show as well. Just, my focus with my podcast is to kind of amplify stories and people who don't get supported on mainstream news. Like, they don't get
Mm.
championed. Like, they're doing great work. They're some of them are policymakers, but they're doing great work. So they don't the mainstream does not want to share what they're doing, right? And so that's my thing. Political Hope is a great way to tune into me. Cosmic Labyrinth we're a collective of burned out professionals, like, healthcare professionals, engineers, artists, teachers, that came together, started a company, and we produce eco restoration festivals. We call them eco cultural restoration festivals because we're also very cultural. We're like multicultural, multidimensional, and we have fun while we do the work. So we are transforming the concept of work. We've built an eco toilet for a regenerative forest project. We've built living labyrinths. We've built domes, like housing domes, like, and we made it all fun. So we made a whole festival around the projects. That's what we do. So if anybody
Amazing.
ever wants to reach out to us and they want to do an ecological project or a restoration, we turn it into a festival. So give us a shout, cosmiclabyrinth.world. Also, cultivatingself.org is a nonprofit that I'm executive director of. It's focused on reframing healthcare by integrating different modalities of healing practices from around the world, and also connecting to farms and farming and regenerative farming, and teaching doctors and nurses and therapists about regenerative food, regenerative farming, and teaching them also about cultural psychology and spiritual psychology, because that's always very ignored in both the therapy spaces as well as the medical spaces. So we're bringing that in. We've literally done projects. We brought a Zen room into a hospital. We've done gardens at clinics. We've done projects with the system.
Oh,
So
such
just to
good
let you
work.
guys know.
That's such good, important work. Thank you
And
for doing
and
that.
we actually started a fellowship, and that we had our first fellowship end last week, and it was huge. I mean, we had our fellowship had oncology nurses, doctors, therapists, yogis joined us who were like, they're healers too, right? We had Ayurvedic healers, TCM, and people loved it. Our fellowship is helps people create a project that they can do transformational stuff in their own community, in their own hospital, their own, like, whatever. Like, we basically created a container to do a project. So we have our next fellowship opening in the spring equinox. So we invite people to come and join that. You don't have to be a clinical healer. You could be a Reiki healer, a yogi, whatever. Healers show up in many forms, right? But we
Of
want to
course.
hold the space and also the validation. So if you're a yogi and you want to bring meditation, you want to bring yoga into the hospital, we have the doctors that can validate that. So we
Great.
have the
Love
community of
that.
practice to help everybody create transformation in the health. And now Maha, right? We might have even more
Yeah.
support with doing some of these things. And then so that's cultivating self. I'm also on a team called California Donut Economics Coalition, which we donut economics, really interesting. Talk about something
Donut.
talk about something
Donut.
unifying, by the way, Cheryl. I've given presentations about this at like in rural communities, in urban communities. I've given it at organizations that are like highly right wing communicate and also very left wing, and everybody loves it. Like, nobody's been like, oh, I hate this. This thing is like, this is like a capitalist or socialist, or like, nobody. The donut economics like fits everybody. It's really cool, right? And so what we're doing, we created a snapshot for California, but basically the donut economic model, it creates a holistic medical report for it can make it for the country, the state, the county, the city. It's like you get a medical report for the community, like a holistic medical
Sweet.
report,
I
which
want to learn more about this.
it's really cool. So once you get that medical report, now you can start investing. The community can start investing in those things to balance those problems, right? Just like if you got a
Right.
medical report for yourself, you'd be like, "Oh, I'm low on this iron. I need to increase my iron intake," right? we're doing that for the community with the donut economics. So that's a really cool way to like approach policy. And we started doing donut festivals, donut eco festivals. So they're kind of like teaching about it, but also like doing stuff with the land. So we've like connected the policy stuff to actually doing ecological work too, which is really
That's
fun,
am-
right?
that's
And then
amazing.
last but not least, what is it? I'm forget. I'm always forget something. Oh, last but not least, get the book. Till
Get
of
the
Last.
book. So where can we get the book?
I'll
The
share the link.
Tale
I'll share the
of
link.
the
Till
Last
of
Restorative.
I'll share the link and people get the book, share this. This is this, if anything, the most important thing I've probably ever done in my life is this thing right here. Because if you can make something for kids, that's it.
Yeah.
I think then we're I
Yeah.
think
It
that's
helps the generations in the future, right? Like if you stop the cycle, then, we have less things to worry about later.
exactly. So yeah.
Oh, my friend, you're so amazing. So we have some things to talk about because we're going to plan another retreat. So obviously, I would love to bring you in for that. I know that's going to be really exciting. And then we have some content that we're producing for Joppa Health that I'd love for you to be a part of. So we'll connect again offline. But I love you. Thank you for coming on and talk and share your heart and all the things that you're passionate about and your story. I hope that people find you and follow you and stay connected to you because you're such a good one.
Oh, thank you, Sean. Likewise, we're reflections of each other on the lotus, right? So
Yeah, we are.
let's
Yeah, we
keep it
are. Thank
going.
you, my friend.
Be
Thank you for
well.
everything you do.
Likewise, Cheryl. Be blessed. Sending everybody love and neuroplasticity. Don't forget your things. Don't forget your finger things,
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah.
Everybody, get your finger. Get your.
Do your practice. Do your finger practice.